My house works out, just so you know. My house has great glutes.
Your house is in good shape.
We are joined by a friend of ours, Eric. Eric Christian Olsen is an actor. He's a producer. He's the host of EMA Talks, and he is here to talk with Dr. J.
Can you tell our listeners a bit about EMA Talks?
Yeah. So the philosophy with the EMA Talks was that essentially we're getting so much information from leaders in the country that's directly in opposition or at war with science in general. And so what we're doing is partnering up with people like you guys and using our platform to have conversations with the smartest people in the room, with the scientists at Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, and finding solutions for a path forward.
Well, we love your passion for the environment and for people and trying to make sure that we're all leaving this earth better than we found it. Dr. Joe is phenomenal to me because his focus is about home, healthy home.
Dr. Joseph G. Allen is an assistant professor at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health and the director of Healthy Buildings Program. Dr. Joe is the leading voice. He's the Brad Pitt of the healthy building space.
Yeah, so first let me say, really great to join you all. And I'll use that clip for my wife. She's a Brad Pitt fan, so Brad Pitt of Healthy Buildings. That just made my career, made my whole family life. So thanks for that. Yeah, so how I got into this, I was doing these forensic investigations of sick buildings for years. So I was in consulting before I was a professor at Harvard. And it grows tiring to say, well, why do we keep having to address these problems after they happen? After people are sick, we're going into these buildings to correct them. We know how to design, operate, and maintain buildings to be healthy in the first place. Can't we push this upstream? So this really piqued my interest. And when a faculty spot opened up at Harvard, I took it, but really wanted to set my research program on course to answer these questions. How do we not just go from disease avoidance, but how do we go to health promotion and using our buildings as the vehicle for that?
And before we get into more detail, can you define for everyone what is a healthy building?
Yeah, it's a great question. So my team released a report we call the 9 Foundations of a Healthy Building. We break down decades of science onto all these factors that influence our health, things like ventilation and air quality and thermal conditions, mold and moisture, lighting and views, safety and security, acoustical performance of course. So all of these things we know matter. And sometimes I think it's easier to define a healthy building by first looking at sick buildings and how we even got here. Right? We've been in the sick building era largely because public health hasn't had a seat at the table in these conversations. I mean, we've made decisions for decades really with an engineering lens. And yeah, we need that, of course, in buildings. But we also need the health lens on top of that. And we've been chasing kind of these minimum standards that are great for engineering, fire, life safety, okay, but not going above and beyond these kind of acceptable minimums into really, optimal, health optimized environments.
It seems like common sense. I mean, it seems, there are so many codes. The national building codes are a lot. I mean, I will even admit, I don't even know half of them because the manual is like this, but there's not enough in there that's really making sure that from the get-go we're thinking ahead. I mean, we've had houses actually not too long ago, I think 2 years ago, we were working with a family. They loved their home. They saved every dollar they had to get into this home. They bought it, was already finished, and it was renovated, and they moved in, and all of a sudden, they started getting health problems. And the son, I think it was their son that started getting a skin condition that they'd never had before. Another started getting some sort of an asthma or something else, and they didn't understand. And they ended up we opened up the walls when we were doing the renovation, and it literally looked like something from Stranger Things. Inside the wall, mold everywhere. It was absolutely a mess. What are some steps that everyday people can be looking at if they're looking to renovate or buying a new home to make sure that they're getting a house that is actually healthy with the aspects that you're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, the stories like that, right, they really just strike at my core. And I'm sure you've seen this just over and over. I've seen it too. I led the investigation for the Consumer Product Safety Commission on the Chinese drywall issue years ago, right? Faulty products put inside these buildings, off-gassing, people reporting all these health complaints. And honestly, people don't believe the occupants at first, right? Oh, they push it aside. No, you just get used to it, figure it out. And like you start opening up the walls and you say, whoa, there's something happening here that's out of sight that's really causing an impact on people. So, I think it's really challenging for consumers when they go into a house, right? So you think about the basics here, right? You can't see behind the wall to know that there's a moisture problem, there's mold. You don't know if there's a radon problem, an invisible radioactive gas that comes out of the ground, second leading cause of lung cancer. How do you assess that? In some states, you have to do a test before you transfer over a home. And how do you do basic indoor air quality, assessments? I have I'm monitoring carbon dioxide in my office right now, but you're going to walk into a home and, people are going to have these sensors and do it. I think the average person isn't going to be able to even interpret that. So I think it speaks to a need to take this, to get it into the code where it just becomes not code minimum, but this is just how it's done better, right? Yeah. Right off the bat. Say, this is the new way to do it. So we're not chasing these problems or leaving it up to the consumer to have a $300 device and be checking their own air quality as they go into a place to decide if that's safe or not for their family, which is where we're at in many cases.
Can you talk about how, people who aren't renovating or looking for a new house, what are some simple things that they can do to make improvements for their health?
I think a lot about what we know in public health, right? If we asked everybody, even ourselves, what does it take to lead a healthy lifestyle, right? We're going to say, well, I have to exercise for sure, right? I have to eat well, no smoking, right? Mm-hmm. And very few people would get to this conversation we're having and say, you know what? It really matters the room, the place I'm in, my house, my school, my office.
My house works out, just so you know. My house has great glutes.
Your house is in good shape. There are some simple tips. We've choked off the air supply in our homes, offices, and schools. So that's number one, right? We've so tightened up our building envelopes that we're stopped letting our buildings breathe, and that just created a buildup of indoor pollutants. Indoor pollutants can be 3, 5, 10 times higher than outdoor air pollution, which I think would surprise most people. Everything from bioeffluents, the stuff that come off us, off-gassing from carpets and cleaners.
Off-gassing from Drew.
Whoa.
Yeah, sure. So all of this, right, it's building up and that's influencing how we feel and operate indoors. So to me, a simple first step is let's let our homes and buildings breathe a bit, right? Let's let in some of that indoor-outdoor, dilute some of what's happening in the indoor environment because the reality is we've chronically underventilating.
I always think, how do I explain this to Jeannie and Paul? And Jeannie and Paul are my parents living in Iowa. And my dad is 75, my mom is 74, and they don't know how to use their cell phones. And so when I talk about the practical action steps of what you're talking about, what are 3 things I can call them today and say, hey, this is how we make your house healthier?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to say without the context of where and when they are. I mean, like if you're in like a Detroit, area, and you want to say where the schools were, then lead is the issue in water. So to generalize it, I mean, these are some of the basics, right? Let's assume that their basics are handled, right? There's no legacy pollutant, water quality is okay. I think some of these things, especially in the winter, that are really quite important, especially for older people, to a little better ventilation. But if that means that maybe you're bringing in outdoor air pollution, the portable air cleaners with a HEPA filter or better filters and recirculated air will go a long way to capturing allergens and also actually in some of these chemicals that reside in dust. It'll help with outdoor air pollution. I think that's an easy fix. Right. 2, a little harder fix, and I'm always hesitant to mention bringing water into a building, but the dry air indoors really does create some challenges for our respiratory system. So if you're older, respiratory condition, thinking about now where infectious diseases spread and even just basic influenza, increasing the humidity up to 40 to 60% with like portable humidifiers can really help your respiratory system. It actually slows down the spread and transmission of viruses on these particles too. And that's really hard, at least where I am, relative humidity is going to be down, in the 20% range. So you want it in the 40 to 60% ideally. So that's 2 right there that I think are pretty good, and some of the basics, again, around air quality specifically. And so I think that's some of the basics. I would also think maybe the third thing is as they think about the products in their house.
Right.
Think about the purchasing decisions and around, the next couch, the next carpet, the types of chemicals we put on our body for deodorants and shampoos. We can make these simple changes and look for these products that don't have these hormone disrupting or endocrine disrupting chemicals in them. That, it's not something you notice right away, right? Like you'll notice air quality and feel, but you won't notice, but it's having an impact on your body, right? So that's a really important change I think all of us should be making, quite honestly, in our future purchasing around our products we're putting into our homes.
The one thing I'd love to hear from you again, we talk all the time. A lot of people think that to be happy and healthy at home is, taking care of yourself and everything you do, but they don't think about a happy, healthy home. It's a healthy home itself. And so I'd just love to hear for you. You have 3 kids. How have things changed from when you were a kid in your home, looking at a healthy home, to how it is now, to how you would love to see it for your kids in 30 years in their homes?
Yeah, what a great question. As I think about the past, me growing up, lead was an issue, asbestos still an issue in older homes and buildings. I think about these new chemicals that my kids and your kids and everybody's kids are exposed to. We're all part of this global chemical experiment, really. I think that's something that will get fixed it needs to get fixed by the time my kids are older. We're playing this game of chemical whack-a-mole where we have a toxic chemical, we swap it out for another one, equally toxic. We keep doing that for decades. And I'm really concerned about what that's doing to our kids. Let me say a positive note though about the kids. This generation gets it. My kids are young. They get sustainability. It's in them. They're like, Dad, why don't we have solar panels on the roof? Why do we have a gas car? I mean, these are the questions 3rd graders are asking right now. And so this is just in them, right? This is how they're getting this. So I think this generation, first, they expect a lot of us. And that scares me the most, thinking, what are my kids going to say about the things we're doing right now? We have to change and get it better. But it gives me a lot of hope for the future that this is just who they are. It's all about health. It's all about sustainability. It's all about equity. So I'm really encouraged by this next crop that's coming up.
Oh my gosh, I love it because we're talking with our nieces and nephews, and they range from 3 to 7, and it's so funny when we talk about certain things, or we're talking about some sort of a pollutant, or we're talking about a clean car as opposed to electric car as opposed to gas, and to them it's just common sense. Why would you do it the other way? Why wouldn't you just use an electric car? I don't understand. Why would you not just have solar panels? Just have solar panels. Yeah. And so it's just so funny when you see these little beings that seem so smarter than us in so many ways, because from living in it over the years, we're trying to justify reasons as to why we do it a different way. But then we start to realize it's just systemic. A lot of this is we've just learned it over the years, and that's why we do it.
It doesn't have to be this way.
It doesn't have to be, but now we know. Now we know what makes for a healthy home. I was going to say a sexy home. Now we know what makes for a sexy home. But I thank you so much for joining us and helping us spread that word of positivity to bring around a happy, healthy home.
Thanks so much for having me. I really, really appreciate it.
Big thanks to Eric and Dr. Joe Allen. By the way, be sure to check out Dr. Joe's book, Healthy Buildings.
And huge thanks to Harvard Chan, Sea Change, and Environmental Media Association. And you can also listen to this full conversation wherever you get your podcasts, and the link is below. Also, we want you to comment below and tell us the things that you're doing to make sure that you're living in a healthy home. Thanks for joining, guys. Thank you.
Bye.
See ya.
You hear my stomach?
I always hear your stomach. Drew's stomach does more talking than I do.
Yeah, it's the 3rd guest. It's the 3rd host of this podcast.
I'd like to interview a special guest. I have sweaty hands.
There you go.
Right.